Well, this was meant to be an easy job. Jim bought it a few years ago from an online vintage Rolex specialist, serviced. Hardly ever worn it, it's a precious timepiece to him, except dried out lubricants. All it should need is a good clean, fresh lubrication, and Bob's your uncle. But when I received it, and I was going to wind it, there was so much resistance, it was unbelievable. Jim told me that's how it's been from day one. He took it to a high street store to make sure the watch is genuine. They confirmed it was, and didn't comment on the resistance. Now we've got the case back off, we need to take the automatic module out before we take the movement out of the case. And that reveals the ratchet wheel. And look at that, scraped on the top and the ball it's connected to. I think we're onto something here. And the wobble, oh wow, that's what you call an excessive side shake. The underside of the automatic bridge, the scraped section, not a surprise, is directly above the ratchet wheel. Without any doubt, it is going to be difficult to wind the watch when you take enough material at the same time. It's nice to have a bit of colour, isn't it? Thank you, Rolex. See the brass coloured wheel? That's the one that makes contact with the ratchet wheel and winds the mainspring. The case is looking a little bit rusty. That's going to be another job that we'll need doing, trying to tidy that up. And it's never perfect. Once rust starts eating steel away, you'll never get it back. On the other hand, the dial looks fabulous, absolutely flawless. We definitely had water getting into the case, but luckily it didn't get to the dial. Arguably one of the most important things about a watch. That's what the owner sees and looks at, and this one looks great. Let's attack the dial side and strip it in the order as the boss says. Rolex is the boss, and you can find a manual online. I'm sometimes scratching my head when I watch videos, and the voice in my head says, "What the beep are you doing? Why is that wheel or that section still there and you're already removing or assembling this? Why are you oiling this when the manual says not to oil?" Oh, look at this. Let me pause it for a second. This is the cam jewel and it's not the right one. The correct jewel doesn't have a sink, and see how it's tilted? The hole in the jewel is too big. It should sit straight. I suppose it doesn't matter in which order you take it apart or assemble it, to a degree. Not always you can get a manual and you just work it out and it's fine. But when you can get the manual, then why not? The click is out of the way. It's not holding the ratchet wheel. The mainspring is unwound, but there is something strange going on in here. The balance keeps going and going. 20 minutes I sat here waiting for it to stop. Well, 20 minutes later, and I can get on with my job. Hurrah! At this moment, I have no idea why it took so long for the power to get depleted. I guess we still have a thing or two to find on the way. It probably has not been serviced for many years, and given the fact that someone was happy to replace the cam jewel with an ill-fitting one, it tells you a little about the repairer and probably the quality of his service. When I say his, I'm not being sexist. I'm positive a woman would only put the right jewel in. Dear me, look at that. No way this could have happened during the time Jim has owned this watch. His watch lives in the box and sees the wrist on the odd occasion. He bought it as serviced. You'd expect the oils and greases to dry out, but not this. The question is, what is a service? Replacing and lubricating gaskets is a service. If you're buying a serviced watch, you need to ask some questions. Has the movement been fully disassembled? Have worn parts been replaced with new parts? You might not get an honest answer, but it's better than nothing. You could also say you're going to get the watch serviced, and that would make the seller very uneasy knowing you're going to be back in a few weeks, waving a bill at him with all the parts that needed replacing. Even better if you had a photo of something like the worn bushing we've just seen. What have we got here? See that rusty colour in the sink around the pivot? Well, that's rust. The pivot is not going to be in a good condition. And no way, I've not seen this before. Can you see the crack in the steel? You see cracked jewels, but the steel part. How do you get a crack in the steel before the jewel cracks? It could have been like that from day one. You can only see it under high magnification, and if I wasn't using the macro lens, or someone didn't inspect it under a microscope, you'd never see it and you'd put it back as it is. That's the thing with watch repair. 100 of a millimeter plays a role. Not always, but at times it does. We're almost there. This is the keyless section. Back in the day, you would have used the key to wind the watch and set the time. Now you don't have a key, you pull the crown into positions and rotate the crown. The crown has replaced the key and its stem interacts with the keyless section of the watch. And in this case, it's the section that would have suffered the most. You feel the pressure of the ratchet wheel grinding against the underside of the automatic framework right under your fingertips on the crown. The stem, all the wheels, the post the wheels are on, all would have been under an enormous pressure when the watch was being wound. Here we go, a bit of good old manual cleaning. I'm not really a fan. I'd rather leave it to the equipment to do the job. But some of the usual spots, the ones the watch cleaning machine can't be bothered with, neither the ultrasonic, you'll have to do it yourself. Bummer. Epilam on the end stones to stop the oil from spreading. And here we have a new replacement setting for the balance. Remember the crack in the steel in the old one? It actually came apart in the watch cleaning machine. Let's oil the other one as well. Put it back in and test it. Same for the escape jewels. Now we're ready for the assembly, and the minute pinion goes in first. It's geared up to do one full rotation every hour. I'll replace the old one with the plastic bushing with a new one that has a jewel. The pinion protrudes through the main plate, and the cannon pinion will be friction fitted on this pinion. It's the connection between the train side we're working on now and the dial side we'll be working on later on. The escape wheel is next, and what I'm doing here, I'm applying Epilam. Think of it as wax on your car. You wax the car but leave a small section with no wax. That section is where the water will accumulate, and the wax will repel the water. In this case, the seconds hand will go on the very tip of it. If we didn't coat it in Epilam, the oil we'll apply here could run all the way to the seconds hand. And I had to replace it, the pivot was rusted, and so was the third wheel pivot. We saw that during this assembly. That's what happens when you don't look after your gaskets. And of course this watch wouldn't be complete without a cracked jewel. It's the one for the third wheel we've just put in. The one that had rust there. Luckily, there are many brand new original Rolex parts about, so replacing parts is not a problem. It's costly, but you can obtain them. I'd rather have that option than not being able to fix the watch. You have to weigh up the cost of the parts and the value of the watch, whether it's worth it or not. But this being a Rolex, it deserves all the care. It's a pretty thing, and valuable. Now, the old ball. The side check is excessive, and no wonder. You can see it's worn out. And the scoring on the ball arbor is something else. Compare it to a new ball. This is nice, that was ugly and no good. Minimal side check. And the worn out bushing, it just shows you what happens when it's not serviced for a long time. Imagine not servicing your car for several years. You'd ruin it. And it's the same for watches. They are mechanical, they need maintenance. This looks much better than it did before. But things didn't go too well. See the scoring on the underside of the barrel and the brass coming out of the thread here? That's the thread from the top. It's where the crown wheel goes. I couldn't tighten the crown wheel fully and it didn't run well, not to my expectations. We also have this peculiar dent here where the wigwag pinion goes. Can't be from the pinion. When it's under the bridge, it would never get to the angle to cause this. How it got there, it's a mystery. After looking at the bridge for a long time, I found the bridge was bent. You can't see where, you just see it's bent. All problems were solved when I replaced the bridge. It was a bit of a long process. Firstly, I assembled it with the old bridge, not being very comfortable about not being able to tighten the crown wheel fully. When I did, it was still quite difficult to wind the mainspring, despite the new bushing and barrel and the ratchet wheel not grinding against the bridge. With the new bridge, it was almost perfect. More onto that later. That's the minute pinion that was fitted earlier on, and the Cannon pinion goes on it. Let's switch to the dial side and install the keyless mechanism. That's the section that would have suffered most. My guess is it's not been serviced for decades. As a consequence, parts need replacing because they are worn out. The two pinions we just fitted, every tooth shows extensive wear from the pressure, and the teeth on the old clutch look pretty chewed up too. It certainly has been disassembled before. There are plenty of marks on the movement that show handling, but I think that's from a long time ago. Since then, it might have been touched up, a little bit of oil here and there, on a movement that hasn't been fully disassembled and cleaned, just to make it a little bit smoother for a short period of time and sell the watch. Someone probably saw what it needed doing, the parts that needed replacing, but if they did that, they wouldn't make as much money on the sale. Let's put the spring there against the back of the yoke. As you pull in the crown, you move in the yoke, which moves the sliding clutch into positions. The first position, you wind the watch. The second position, you still wind the watch if you rotate the crown clockwise, and when you rotate it anti-clockwise, you'd be setting the date. The third position, you'd be setting the time. We've got a couple of wheels to put on these two posts, so let's lubricate them. That's the setting wheel. It interacts with the clutch. And that's the minute wheel that sits between the Cannon pinion and the setting wheel. I'm not sure why it's called the minute wheel. It's the Cannon pinion where the minute hand will go. And the final part of the keyless to install is the jumper. It keeps the yoke in positions, which in turn keeps the clutch in positions. It's all fairly simple. All watches work on the same principle. It might be done differently, different design, but you will always have a sliding clutch there that will be engaging with different wheels or pinions, winding the watch, setting the date, day, and so on. There's a lot of friction whenever you push or pull the crown, and all high friction areas need to be lubricated to make the action smooth. We're in the first position, second, third, and back to the first one. Let's stand back a little to see the full picture. First position winding, second position winding and setting date. We still have to install the date corrector for quick set date. We'll do that shortly. And third position, we're moving the Cannon pinion, setting the time. The Cannon pinion is friction fit. It slips on the minute pinion when you set in the time. We're back on the train side, and the whole purpose of this section is to reach the ratchet wheel via a series of wheels and pinions and wind the mainspring. There is also one wheel that disengages the ratchet wheel when setting the date. And the issue with the old bridge when I couldn't tighten the crown wheel fully? Now it's perfect. And guess what? It still wasn't as smooth as I'd expected. What did I find? Can you see it? That little bit there, sticking out, was causing friction against the crown wheel. How did that get there? Maybe it was like that from day one. Who knows? Perhaps Rolex quality control missed it. And this is called the wigwag pinion. When you pull the crown to the second position and turn anti-clockwise, it will set the date. When you turn clockwise, it will move towards the ratchet wheel and wind the mainspring. It goes from one side to another depending on which way you turn the crown. Personally, I'd call it a swinger, but I think Rolex is a little bit more conservative than me. Just look at it. It swings from one side to another. That's the spring for the click to keep the click in position. It's gonna end up hidden under the ratchet wheel. And I replaced it. The old ratchet wheel was scuffed, and the Rolex is supposed to be pretty. Going into all this effort trying to make this watch as good as possible, but leaving a scuffed wheel there, I couldn't do it. I know you can't see it, it's not a see-through case bag, but you know it's there. What you often see might not be the final oiling. I do a little on the camera so you can't see it, which means I can't see it well. And when the footage is taken, I then inspect it in my own comfort and top it up if I need to. It's not just these pivots, other posts and parts too. I often oil it from the back, which you see as the front, and that's kind of awkward for me. Now, while I'm on the pallet stones, we already coated the escape wheel teeth. They interact with the pallet stones. Then the balancing, and we can test it. It's always a tense moment. All the hard work, and if it doesn't run well, you have to start looking into it, looking into the cause, and when you have to take parts out, you mess up the oiling, and you have to start from scratch. Not much of a concern for me, but for a professional, where time is money, it's a whole different story. And I ended up adjusting the balance end shake. It's the blued screw. Someone glued it to fix it. After the initial clean, the top of the balance arm had glue on it and the screw was loose. Not really a big deal. Once the balance is secure, the screw won't move. It's when you're handling it. It will move and it will need adjusting every time you put the balance back in. And it's now slowing down straight away. No more waiting for 20 minutes. Let's check the balance hack. Now the timing needs adjusting and we need the microstellar tool for that. I'm gonna have to do this off the camera. There are divisions on the tool and one division will adjust it by 1 or 2 seconds depending on whether you turn the 2 larger or the 2 smaller screws. Whichever you choose, they need to be turned both equally. Now let's put it on the E-timer. I lubricated the escapement of the camera, so let's have a look at it how it performs. And it's pretty good. The rate for each position is here. Amplitude for dial up and dial down is identical. Beater is fine, a little higher in one position but nothing drastic. We'll have another look at it when it's all assembled, but for now, let's move on. It's a pretty movement, very nicely executed by Rolex. I hope you're enjoying it. If you do, please give this video a like and subscribe. It boosts the algorithm, more people will get to see it, and most of all, I will know you like what I do and that drives me to make more videos and do my best to make the next one better. I know it's a lot of energy to click on the like button, but if you do like it, please click the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. We're now in the section where the date change happens at midnight, and this is where the date wheel goes. During this assembly, we saw that the jewel that was there wasn't the correct one. It was beveled, it had a sink, and the hole was too big for the pivot. You can see the old one on the left, 2 very different jewels. The hour wheel goes on the Canon pinion and it meshes with the minute wheel pinion. It's geared up to do 1 full rotation every 12 hours and the hour hand goes on the hour wheel. The date wheel goes on this post and the spring is strong, very strong. And see, it meshes with the hour wheel. It's geared up to do 1 full rotation every 24 hours. And when it reaches midnight, it will change the date. Now this is the setting for the date indicator. The date indicator is the ring with the date numbers on it. It needs to be lubricated but only very lightly because it will be in contact with the date indicator. And that's the date jumper, and the whole purpose of it is to keep the date indicator in position. It's slightly raised off the main plate and it should be flush. We'll just have to see whether it's going to be an issue. But before we do that, we need to install the date corrector. That's the mechanism that's engaged when you set in the date manually. It moves the date indicator as you're rotating the crown. And a very, very small amount of grease on the beak of the date jumper. We really don't want the grease on the date indicator. No matter how well a watch is serviced, if the owner sees a grease patch on the date, he's not going to be happy. And I had to do some bending. It was jumping above the date indicator. Now it's flush and it works perfectly. It's nice when it all comes together and everything works nicely. That's the date corrector in action when you're changing the date manually and it moves out of the way when you wind in the watch. Like a symphony, you the conductor of this all with your fingertips. So pretty, and now it's the time to cover it all, never to be seen by the owner. But that doesn't matter. When you own a Rolex, you know you have a high quality movement inside that's very handsome. It's all about knowing more than seeing. It's how it makes you feel. And how you feel, you don't need your eyes for that. That's all internal, just like the movement inside this Rolex. And the dial is very handsome. Not too much, not too little, nothing you will get tired of. Rolex got it right with the Datejust on all fronts. It's been going since 1945. This example, 36mm, white gold fluted bezel, Jubilee bracelet, in my opinion, is the best looking Datejust. Everything just right. It's a joy using this hand fitting press. Movement holders are made to fit the base. The spindle is directly above the center of the dial, so you don't have to move it around to center it. And you have a selection of tips to fit the diameter you need. Now the minute hand is pressed on the cannon pinion, and the seconds hand is pressed on the second wheel, the one we coated the tip in epilam. That's it, job done. But of course we can't put that in the case looking like this. It's mainly dirt and grime, but we do have some rust there that needs to go. Pegwood and elbow grease will sort it out. It did take some time, but the result is pretty good. The crystal is not too bad, but you can't tell from the cyclop it's some kind of a cheapo. Now we've got to be careful here. The fluted bezel is made of white gold and that's softer than steel. We can't just push and push to make sure it's seated well. That could ruin the bezel. And I couldn't see. The camera was where I wanted my head to be, so I had to finish it off the camera. But yeah, it's in place and the bezel is just fine. A new O-ring is definitely needed. The rust we saw, it was around the crown area. It needs a new one to keep it waterproof. It's one of the basic things every owner should keep on top of. If nothing else, at least new gaskets, or get the old ones cleaned and lubricated. See the state of that? It's a mess. This is for the automatic module. Again, this comes down to not reading the service manuals. It clearly states, neither the clicks nor the toothing of the reversing wheels are lubricated. Only the pivots of the wheels should be lubricated. The wheels actually need to be coated in epilam to keep the lubricants away. Night and day difference after a bit of scrubbing than a cycle in the watch cleaning machine. I mean, look at it. Look at the colours. Isn't it beautiful? We do like a bit of colour, don't we? So yeah, this is the automatic module. It winds the mainspring for you as you wear the watch. This is where the ratchet wheel was grinding. It's only cosmetic and it's on the underside of the bridge. There is no need to replace it. You can't see it from the top and it doesn't affect running of the watch. The oscillating weight pivot looks like it's worn here, but it's just a reflection. This is what it looks like from a different angle. Now we can put those two together and we need this little C-clip for that. And that works rather nicely. A little bit of oil here. And also on this pivot, a pinion goes on it and it's only the oil that keeps it in place when you turn it around. I put a little bit more on it than what you saw. The last thing you want is that pinion falling off when you're placing the module in the watch. It's so close to the balance it could make a big mess of the hairspring. Not the prettiest design, but the oil works. It is what it is. A touch of oil here. Very smooth, very pretty. Such a handsome movement, it's a feast for the eyes. We need to make sure it's going to stay this way. Nice new lubricated gasket to keep the elements away, and it should be good for several years. Watches need looking after, you can't stretch it for decades. Parts will wear out, movements no longer in production, and it could be tricky to get new parts. Look after them. A quick look at the time grapher, it's running well. If you skipped it, I did timing in all 6 positions earlier on after installing the train. Okay, I'm done. Please like and subscribe, and if you don't want to miss my future videos, enable the notifications. Bye for now.